Hi, my name is James Luckhurst from Project Edward, and this is the second of our First Friday informal conversations during which we choose and mull over a particular topic. So today, commercial driver well-being. A little bit of introduction then. Commercial drivers keep our economy moving, but the human toll is staggering. Over half of UK commercial drivers are reported to be overweight. 1 in 10 contends with undiagnosed type 2 diabetes. Long hours and irregular shifts leave nearly 40% sleep deprived, sharply increasing the risk of collisions and incidents. Beyond the physical consequences, more than half of drivers experience loneliness and chronic stress, factors which can quickly escalate into burnout and negatively impact decision-making behind the wheel. So today's Project Edward First Friday round table brings tangible solutions and conversations about these critical issues with expert guests: Mark Cartwright from National Highways, Anna Earl from Nutrivival, Kate Walker from Diabetes Safety, and also Sean Bridle from Warwickshire County Council. The session will explore effective wellbeing initiatives, share nutrition advice suited to the realities of driving for a living, and highlight the life-saving importance of early diabetes detection. So we're setting ourselves quite a high bar. We've got lots to do in the time. Let's just kick off straight away and just hand the floor to Mark, Anna, Kate, Sean, just to say hello and who you are and what you do. Starting with Anna.
Good morning. Thank you very much, James. My name's Anna Earl. I'm a nutritional therapist, a former police officer, and I specialise in a very interesting area called chrononutrition, which looks at biological rhythms, the 24-hour clock of digestion, food timings, food choices, and the impact on health, those short and long-term, short-term energy levels, long-term health conditions. I've been working back in policing, helping shift workers with what to eat on different shift patterns. And in the last couple of years have moved more into the transport sector, particularly helping some bus companies with reports of driver fatigue, sleepiness at the wheel, and looking at their dietary choices, and sort of doing some coaching around nutrition science and offering some alternative suggestions to their regular diet.
Thank you. We'll move to Kate Walker.
Good morning, all. Kate Walker. I set up and run the Diabetes Safety Organisation. We released a report this year, first of its kind, looking at the impact of type 2 diabetes across the industry, the impact both for individuals, drivers, and kind of road users as a whole, and what can be done around this epidemic. So as James pointed out, 1 in 11, 1 in 10 have diabetes in the workforce. It goes up to 1 in 6 if they drive professionally for a living, and 1 in 3 over the age of 55 and drive professionally for a living. So something really to consider and have a chat about this morning.
Thanks, Kate. Sean, would you like to say hello?
Good morning. My name's Sean. I'm a retired police officer specialising in traffic, 30-year service in Warwickshire. And I'm now a road safety officer within Warwickshire County Council. One of the areas of my work is looking at risk on the road and driving for work and going into businesses and sort of like offering advice in relation to driving for work policies and general road safety. And I also bring with me the experience from 30 years of policing, where I've seen obviously the worst that happens when people get it wrong.
Thank you very much, Sean. Mark, I'm going to do it for you, because we're going to start the conversation. So I will introduce you. Mark Cartwright, Head of Commercial Vehicle Incident Prevention at National Highways. Mark has been instrumental in shaping initiatives that enhance the safety, health and well-being of professional drivers across the UK's road network. His work focuses on tackling the root causes of incidents, promoting safer driving cultures and supporting businesses in maintaining high standards of fleet management. In today's discussion, hopefully, we'll be exploring how driver welfare links directly to road safety, as well as the latest developments in incident prevention and how technology, training and policy are evolving to support the commercial driving community. Does that sound like you, Mark? Have we got that one right?
I'm quite impressed myself, if I'm being honest, with you, James. Can you send me that over? I'll add that into my CV. It was good.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to your agent then about they'll be on for a bigger fee. Mark, just sort of tell us what's top of your to-do list at the moment. What are the hot topics?
Oh, it kind of ties really tightly into this, James, to be honest. And I've seen the other speakers on the event this morning. People have heard me say this, I guess, quite regularly, but it's not vehicles that crash, it's people that crash. And when you start digging into why that happened, very often it's all about human performance at the end of the day. And we talk about the kind of 5 known unknowns when we're talking about this. And just very quickly for people on the call is, if you imagine this as the kind of a 5-circle Venn diagram, the reason we know we're in the mix of the knowns, we struggle a little bit with working out what the exact proportionality and the size of the circles are, but we're working on that at the moment. But the great majority of incidents are caused by distraction, fatigue, impairment, medical conditions, or a mistake, which is where we haven't quite managed to nail it down to one of the others, but they're almost certainly in there. And very often there's a crossover, I think the old Venn diagram where you're getting crossing over, but it's about human performance. And fundamentally, what we're very heavily involved in is trying to raise awareness of this issue of driver roadworthiness. A lot of businesses are brilliant at the vehicle roadworthiness, but the vehicle isn't going to crash until we stick a driver behind the wheel of it. And actually getting people to think about how they are working with their drivers, how they're looking after their welfare, how they're encouraging good practices across their drivers, etc., etc. And very often, one of the things that's very ironic, I feel, is we'll be working with businesses who are actually really good at doing this with their people in their offices and in their factories and in their shops and on the construction sites. Yet somehow the drivers, out of sight, out of mind, tend to miss out on this.
Well, let's have a look at how you make those approaches then. How can you improve the well-being of a commercial driver, and who do you need to work with in order to make those improvements?
We'll work with anybody that will give us 5 minutes is the honest answer, James. I mean, it is about getting the risk of driving acknowledged at the board level, the SLT level. For me, it ought to be a standing item on every agenda of the board, is what is happening out on the roads. I'll just very quickly share this with you. If I had a single silver bullet that I could fire in this space, it would be to make on-road incidents RIDDLE reportable, which they're not. We know a lot of organisations do actually investigate their on-road incidents pretty well. An awful lot of others don't, to be fair. But one of the organisations that does it very well, and I won't mention them, but I rang them up a few weeks ago, and the guy that done this, and they'd spent an awful lot of time and effort getting a very, very robust and mature process in place. And I asked him a really simple question. I said, I want a top of your head answer. Is, do you feel your organisation investigates your on-road incidents with the same rigour as they would do if it was an on-site incident and was RIDDLE reportable? And I thought his answer was really interesting, because he said, yes, we do, but... And the but is, they're not reported at board level. All RIDDLE reportable incidents, somebody falling down some stairs or whatever it happens to be on site, is reported at board level. Basically, anything less than a fatality out on the roads involving a vehicle isn't reported at board level. So their board are pretty much unsighted on what is, of course, a very significant risk to that organisation.
Let's get a picture. There's no such thing as an average or a typical commercial driver. So give me some examples of, without naming names, some good practice and some less good practice, because they're sharing the roads together. And so we're all at risk from the ones that aren't doing it right.
It's dangerous to typify, James, of course it is. However, I'm sure many of the people on the call today will be aware of the sterling work that Loughborough University have been doing with their SHIFT project and some of the data that's come out of that. I know Kate will talk about some of the prevalence of diabetes and pre-diabetes. Your average HGV driver is overweight, spends a lot of time on the backside, very sedentary roles, everything that goes along with that, sleep disorders, everything. So, that's all available, it's all online, it's all public record. I'm sure many people are very much aware of this. But we also talk a lot about the van drivers, and indeed the company car and grey fleet drivers that are out there. And from a company car grey fleet point of view, or was that soldier in the previous run, there's lots of pressures, there's lots of issues in there. You're grabbing food as you go in, however good your intentions are. I always used to seem to end up with a Mars bar and a Cornish pasty somewhere along the lines. But people need to be aware of this. So many organisations, as I say, are very caring about the people who they're seeing every day, the people in the factories and all the rest of it. They're giving them advice and making healthy nutrition choices available, all the rest of it. But the drivers, is very, very difficult to do that. Van drivers, car drivers, they're on a similar trajectory. We did some work a number of years ago, so we'd be aware of the Freight Transport Association for many years, leading their Van Excellence programme. HGV drivers, well known, it's an unhealthy ageing cohort by and large. Van drivers tend to be younger, which drops them to be, sadly, more into that lead demographic for mental health and suicide issues than perhaps the HGV drivers are a bit older and a bit more mature about some of this stuff. But they're on a similar trajectory. Van drivers tend to be less sedentary because we made a very broad categorisation. They were either doing drivers or carrying drivers, i.e. they were delivering as opposed to being an engineer who was actually doing something when they got to site with their van. Either way round, they tend to be significantly less sedentary than an HGV driver whose job is to sit there, drive it to wherever it's going, and in most cases sit back while somebody else unloads it. But the trajectories are similar. And, at the end of the day, we all spend time out on our roads surrounded by commercial vehicles, or we tend to call them at-work drivers because we're trying to get more and more into the car space as well. But we all spend a lot of time out on the road with at-work drivers. And whatever those health issues are, those wellbeing issues that those individuals face, it all impacts on general road safety.
Mark, thank you very much. Let me turn to Kate. We've heard the facts and statistics. Perhaps we don't need to go into too much detail about them, but let's just have a look immediately and think about, well, lifestyle change. Where can it start? How early can it start? Because we're trying to find solutions and ways forward. So if we want to start to reverse, pre-diabetic symptoms in a commercial drivers, how soon, how early in a process can that start?
I think the easy answer is very early, and the sooner the better, I think, is the simple and short answer. You're right. We've got 13.9 million people with pre-diabetes in the UK as a general number. I think it's very hard, and Anna will go into a lot more of the detail on nutrition in her area because that's her skill set. We look much more at kind of the nudge techniques and the work around what small changes make a difference. So, if we take one less sugar in 6 coffees a day, it's 1 kilogram less a month. So by the end of the year, it's 12 bags of sugar. You work for a company for 10 years, it's 120 bags of sugar. That's enough to prevent, for some people, caveats included, but for some people, that's enough to prevent diabetes or reverse or control or manage. Sometimes I think we can get too caught up in that we need to be perfect or we need to be specific. We can generalize. I do think everyone wakes up with the intent to make good choices. I don't think anyone wakes up to think we're going to go eat all the Cornish pasties and Mars bars like Mark's suggestion earlier. The intent is right. Everyone wants to be healthy and well. Lifestyle patterns, programming, we're faced with a lot. So I think these small wins done early, if we can capture those early younger ages, we can go in at different angles and do these nudge techniques and do small adjustments. We all know if we took out the sugar this morning from our coffee and people go, I don't have sugar. Well, we could have biscuits or crisps. There's plenty of things we can take out of our diets. But if we can take that out, in a couple of weeks, we forgot it was in, that will make a significant difference in that 10-year lifespan of that sugar intake or lack of. I think they're the things that we need to be looking at as those early wins. We are seeing also diabetes dropping, as Mark said, this age demographic. We've seen the biggest rise in 45 to 65s with type 2. So it's not just this older generational view of diabetes that we used to have. So I think, as you say, James, the quicker we can make small adjustments, really make changes, I think the sooner we can start to slow this epidemic down.
And as a bit of advice for us then, what are the warning signs of diabetes that are perhaps most commonly missed? Especially if we're now needing to look at the 45 plus, what should we be looking out for? What is easily missed?
I think diabetes as a whole is easily missed, which is not the best answer to come up with. We're seeing about 60% don't perceive to have symptoms when they get diagnosed because they are the simple things. Slightly thirsty, wake in the night to go to the toilet, maybe going to the toilet a bit more, not feeling quite right. They're all quite relatively mild for the world we live in. Everything's fast paced. It's all happening. We ignore, we have a headache, we take something for it. We are avoiding seeing the symptoms our bodies present these days are just ignored. Until someone's got significantly bad back pain, we'll ignore it, take the painkillers and carry on. Because the symptoms aren't huge for diabetes necessarily, they're easy to push aside. So more thirsty, going to the toilet in the night. Weight loss can be one, particularly for type 1, but can also be for type 2. Just feeling groggy. And I think the best example, surely no one on the call ever has had a sugar high or a hangover, but those sorts of things are the symptoms that we would anticipate feeling or seeing for the symptoms of diabetes. So again, very easy to push away to late nights. Of course, I'm tired, got kit, whatever that looks like. So I think it is a challenge. But again, my bigger concern in this industry, and what we see when we go to truck stops and when we go to places, is the fear. There's a fear, if I get diagnosed, I can't do my job. And I think that even if they've got the symptoms, I think they'll be ignored even more in this industry, because there's this real non-knowing that if I have diabetes, I can't drive. Well, it's not true, but that's the fear. When we're on truck stops, we'll set up and I'll have people walking as far away from me as possible, despite me telling them I've taken my shower. I assure you, we're not going to bite. They don't want to know, and they'll shout across, well, actually, I don't want to know. I don't want to lose my job. So I think there's this requirement that we educate that they're not going to lose their job, that they are safe to drive, and actually put in place, we can keep people in work longer and prevent the complications, which are the risks that they could lose their license. So I think there's quite a lot of work to do around all of this for people to make those adjustments.
Let's move to Anna Earl from Nutrivival. Just tell us a few kind of good news stories that you've been involved with recently. Some wins that you've had working with operators or clients to actually bring about some nutritional improvements for drivers.
And so I've worked with I was given a group of about 10 bus drivers with one company where there had been some reports of fatigue, and they wanted to do an education piece. So we started off talking about the macronutrients, what that means, what they do to the body physiologically. And then we talked about different shift patterns the bus drivers are working. So some of them on an early shift will start at 3 a.m. So they will be up at 1 in the morning. They'll have a meal which they might call breakfast. It might be a large bowl of Frosties and a bottle of Lucozade to give them a boost of energy. They think they need that dose of energy, that high sugar meal, not realizing that hugely spikes their blood sugar, and that by sort of early morning for us, maybe sort of by 6-7 o'clock in the morning, they're feeling really sleepy, having a blood sugar slump, and that can affect both mood, but also can make them feel quite sleepy, maybe a bit irritable, and drive some quite strong food cravings for the next dose of high energy food. So it will drive a desire to replicate really the breakfast meal they've just had. So something quick that's going to give them that dose of energy to pull their blood sugar back up again. But unfortunately, those choices then will re-spike that blood sugar. If it's something like a sweet drink, a can of Red Bull, often reliance on caffeine and sugary drinks now, whether it's a bar of chocolate from the vending machine in the depot, whatever it might be. Greggs is often very close by to a lot of bus depots, Greggs and McDonald's. So all of those foods really will tend to re-spike the blood sugar. So they'll be on this trajectory of spikes and crashes throughout the day, not realizing that those food choices are actually driving exactly how they feel. So we did an education piece with this group, set them an individual little health goal to work towards over a month. So whether it was reducing sugar in coffee, like Kate said, just a small win that they felt was manageable. It might have been something linked to exercise, because we talked also a lot about the other lifestyle factors that go a lot like hand in hand with driving. So it may be that when they're on a break, rather than going and having a nap in the depot, they might try and find somewhere to have a 10-minute walk and get some fresh air. So they all each identified a manageable health goal, and then we met again for a one-to-one session a month later. And one driver in particular had gone to his GP and found out that he could do a weight loss program for free through the GP service because of his weight. He'd enrolled his son as well, who was also very overweight. So the two of them were going to the gym together for free on the NHS for I think it was a 6-month membership they had for free at their local gym. He had switched his Frosties to some overnight oats. He had cut out Lucozade and was taking a trail mix tub with him to work with nuts and dried cranberries. And he said, I've not felt sleepy once at the wheel. And he said, my health future looked very dark previously. And he said, I think this program is going to save my life.
That's fantastic. But let's try and give some practical advice so that other drivers might be able to think about doing the same thing. How can they maintain those sorts of consistent, healthy eating habits when working like unpredictable routes and schedules that change very rapidly?
It's really hard. So luckily, this group had all decided to club together to support each other. So the peer support aspect was huge. They set up a WhatsApp group with their operations manager who was leading that, who was very encouraging. They would share photos of healthy food that they'd made at home and brought to work with them for their lunches. Things that they said previously, they would have mocked each other had they seen each other eating like a tuna salad or whatever it might have been that they brought in. But they were in this together. The company was supporting them. They were providing some boxes of fresh fruit in the depot. I was trying to encourage them to remove the vending machine that was just chocolate crisps and energy drinks and cans of Coke. They haven't quite got to that stage yet, but we have talked a lot about healthier vending machine options. They talked about where they could. I mean, one of the big problems actually was hydration and the fear of not finding anywhere on their routes to stop to the toilet, particularly with the slightly older drivers. Had a huge fear about being caught short and then being disciplined if they had to abandon the bus to go and find somewhere to have a wee. And so we took that to the sort of senior managers as well and said, we need some positive, some sort of practical solutions for this aspect as well, because they can't be frightened of drinking water throughout their whole shift. And then they were worried about when they go home, if they rehydrate at home, that would then keep them awake at night and they'd be up a lot during the night needing to go to the toilet. So just sort of even practical things like that. But it really needed such a multi-pronged approach rather than just the driver deciding he wanted to try and eat more healthily. The environment is stacked against them. There's unhealthy food choices everywhere. And so it needed them to learn the mechanics of nutrition, how to make better food choices, what that looks like practically on a plate of food, but then also taking that to the organization to say, how can you support the drivers to have access to this healthy food, particularly on shifts where lots of places that will serve healthier food are closed outside of regular 9 to 5 hours. How can you be an encouraging organization and employer to make this as easy as possible, so that the drivers stand much more of a fighting chance of this being long-term changes.
And what's the answer? How do you get an employer on side and try and bring about for that top-down change or the support that's needed?
I think partly you have to sort of sell the financial benefits of saying that this could save you money in long term with increased sickness, the catastrophic cost, not just financial, of a driver having an accident because he's fallen asleep at the wheel, because of that low blood sugar, or because he's just felt tired from having not slept well. So like looking at all that lifestyle implications and saying this is not just a fluffy well-being input. This is about health and safety and embedding this as part of your health and safety policy, your onboarding training, getting the drivers as young as possible to understand the links between diet, lifestyle, and road safety, and their long-term health as well. So sort of getting people to see those links, which a lot of drivers didn't make the links, have not had that kind of nutrition education before. And then getting the senior leaders to sort of recognise that too and realise it's a priority to invest.
Thank you, Anna. I'm just going to pause a minute because there's a comment in the chat from Nick Evans. Nick, I think you should be able to turn your camera and microphone on and join in if you wish, and you could bring that into this conversation. If you would like to try, you're very welcome to put your camera and mic on.
Good morning.
Hi, Nick. How are you?
Hello.
Tell us a bit about you first.
Well, there's a couple of members on there, Mark and Anne. I think know where I come from. I'm mobile phone issues we cover with Drive Commander, and obviously driven to distraction now. I've been in the situation with long distance driving, and the problem is very relevant here with the healthy side of things. I always struggled to get good, wholesome food. So the problem is we've got a society now that is just totally encapsulated with fast food. Why aren't we hitting these push? I've got to call them pushes because that's what it is. You know, everything is geared to the sweet stuff, the bad foods. You know, every single service station you go in, like Anna said, there's a McDonald's, there's a Greg's. You know, okay, you know, these companies make a lot of money for the country, but they also cost the country as well with health issues. And the other problem is getting in to see a GP. You know, if you have got an issue with weight loss, you know, the GP aren't ready available. You know, it takes a long time to get an appointment outside the normal hours. You know, you've got to take time off work to go, and you know we're pushed from pillar to post as far as working is concerned. So these guys and girls who are driving on a regular basis have really got, you know, a lot to put up with.
Okay, let me stop you there a second. And Kate, do you have any practical tips for like getting a GP appointment? If presumably if you're a member of staff, if you're employed as a driver, there would be occupational health assistance. But just help us out there, Kate, with any practical tips.
I don't have many on that one because it is a real challenge. We know it's not straightforward. Obviously, companies have occupational health. I think we can start to look at that and maybe use those better and see whether they can start pulling in. For some, they do diabetes testing already from our angle, but I do wonder whether companies can up and do more testing in the workplace because of that problem. I think there's a real call towards that moving forward, that these tests become more thorough, I think maybe is the best word in occupational health. I think there's more that could be done in the workplace, and I think that would solve some of these challenges. There are, the sort of home testing kits so people can get some stuff, but someone's put on there about virtual GP services, which are available. There's a lot of options if we look around, but I think the difficulty will be we've got to find those solutions. And I do think there's a lot of this now. It's taking that personal responsibility for your health, whereas before we had that option of just GPs doing it more. I think we've got to find our roots through this a lot more individually and fight for your appointments. It's get yourself in, make those calls. And I think they're the difficulties when you're working on a bus or in one of the vehicles and you can't make the call. I think they're the challenges that need to be faced by GPs. I don't think I have a full answer. I think it's how do you talk to your employer to say, I need to be on the call at this time to get my GP appointment? I think they're the complexities we're looking at.
Let's bring Mark in. You've got your hand up, Mark Cartwright. And thanks, Nick, for that. For raising that. Thank you, Mark. Sorry.
One of the things that strikes me is we all know it's incredibly difficult to get that environment where a driver can get access to medical advice, they can get access to good healthy food and perhaps exercise equipment and all that. One of the things that we're working on quite hard behind the scenes is, and forgive me, it's a bit of a daft name for a project, but something we're calling power procurement. If you think about all of these at-work drivers, they're only on the road because they are working for an employer. That employer has probably only booked them on the road because they're working on a contract or they're providing products and services maybe to very often a larger, bigger organisation. We've got a supply chain with 85,000 odd people in it. So there's an opportunity there for those procuring organisations, and initially we're thinking primarily in the public sector, to be saying, look, if you want to come and work for us, we're going to ask you to demonstrate your credentials around protecting the environment, diversity, modern day slavery, all that kind of stuff. Well, tell us you're actually good at looking after your drivers and your own safety. That starts getting people's attention if you start being a more demanding client on it, because otherwise it just gets into that, forgive me, but is that too difficult to do pile? You know, I'm also very conscious, and I can say this, so do forgive me, ladies, is, you know, we're in an horribly male-orientated industry. Getting a bloke to a doctor's in the first place is a bit of a challenge. Never mind thinking I might lose my driving license, or I'm not really going to help me drivers do this because I need to get that load delivered or that engineer to site. It is a challenge, but that isn't a reason for us to shy away from it, because it's such a big prize at the end of it. So yeah, that's my piece. Is I think procurers of services ought to start throwing their weight around a little bit more and be more prescriptive of their expectations.
Mark, thank you very much. Let's take a slight change of tack and bring Sean Bridle in for a chat. Sean, 30 years in the police, most of that in the traffic region. Tell us about the kind of circumstances in which you would be talking to commercial drivers.
Yeah, it basically comes when they've done something wrong, and sometimes when they've done something wrong is then too late because they've been involved in that collision or that incident. And some of those occasions we're not able to speak to those individuals because it's gone so catastrophically wrong that obviously they've died. When we have spoken to, or when I've spoken to commercial drivers in my previous role, is because, like I say, they've done something wrong. If you do get the opportunity to speak to them, you then tend to find is the usual stuff. So you're finding your diabetes, you're finding your overweight. It's very rare that a police officer will start talking to them about their lifestyle choices and their diets, because they'll be focused on the task at hand, which will be 9 times out of 10 will be enforcement. And if we do go down the education line, it tends to be the education around, don't do what you've just done, which is wrong and illegal. But I think overall, obviously, listen to everybody is a major culture change we need to have, and it's if we start to have the culture change with our drivers, I think it's too late, because by that point their behaviours are already installed in them. We need to start at schools. There's a lot of curriculum on there. I mean, there's a drive at the moment to get road safety and education. That's a start. I think there should be more focus within the school curriculum in relation to diet, lifestyle, nutrition, and fitness, so that becomes ingrained as part of their lifestyle. And then when they go on to industry and start working, again, that should be included as part of their work. Everything's focused on getting that delivery to that point or getting to your appointment. So therefore, we try and get there as quick as we can, and we get the job done, and then we go. And that's the culture that we live in. You then look at places where these drivers are going to go to have their break, to have their refreshments. Within HGV world and coaches, obviously we've got driver's hours, so they're restricted the amount of time they can drive. So we're saying to them, actually, it's bad for you if you sit behind the wheel for more than 4 hours at a time. Therefore, you need to go and have a break. But guess what? They get out their vehicle, they go and sit in a service station, and they sit down again. So they're not doing any exercise. And then when you go to these service stations, and I know I've worked there before I started in the police. I actually worked at Corley Services on the M6. All the food tends to be quick fast food, because again, the aim is let's get them served, let's get them out, let's get the next customer. And from the driver's point of view, I want to go in, get my food, and get back out on the road. So everything's focused around speed, as opposed to the healthy choices, which might take a little bit of time to cook, like the freshly cooked meals and stuff. And then if you do have those, motorway services, we all know, the costs are ridiculous compared to a normal high street, and they'll say it's because of higher operating costs, etc. Well, my argument is, how can it be a high operating cost? You tend to own the land that you're on anyway. You've got service station, you've got property, you've got land, you've got parking space, and then you're actually on the motorway. So all the service providers are coming past you every single day and every single minute. So how can it cost more to get stuff to you when it's literally driving past your front garden, in effect? And again, from my experiences, I was a manager at Corley Services 30 odd years ago. We used to, on a monthly basis, sort of like cost what it used to cost us to do a product, and therefore used to push the most profit-making products to the public. And the most common one we used to push is a pot of tea. And back then, a pot of tea used to cost us something like £1 to retail, to sell to people, to sell to customers. But it used to actually cost us in the region of 5p or less to make. And that took into account everything from the actual tea, the hot water, and the wages. So there's clearly scope for these companies to make better choices as to what they provide for customers, and also to reduce the cost, because that's another thing that will put people off. Like you say, why should I go and pay, £6-7 for a healthy salad when I can get a sandwich for £2? And if you could get a sandwich for £2 at the services, then you're doing really well. But that's sort of like an example. So all those, and then the other incentive is there's no way for them to exercise. So actually go and take a break. Actually, why not some of these service stations? Okay, we might provide like somewhere where you can walk, but let's face it, we live in England. The outside weather isn't always the best. So why not provide somewhere indoors where, perhaps a little treadmill can jump on it for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and walk a bit and get a little bit of exercise and get the heart going. Because my experiences are, and we've all been there, we've all done it, we've all gone on holiday and driven somewhere. We stop, we get out of the car, we go and sit down, and then that's it. We have a coffee, something to eat, and then we get back in the car again. So exercise-wise, we're not doing anything. If that is your life, because you're living on the road, it's no wonder that we're overweight. It's no wonder that, we lack of exercise and stuff like that. So I think there needs to be a major culture change. The other side of it is, if you're going to start getting those on the coal face, or the likes of National Highways or police or other agencies, then there needs to be a change within our culture. Perhaps educate some more police officers that are on the coal face around road safety. National Highways, you've got the signs and everything else. Put a little bit more about stuff like that out there and start raising the awareness. But it needs to change from the very beginning. And I think by the time that we get to see them, it's hard to get those changes made, because their culture is already ingrained. This is what we do. So why should I change?
There used to be an initiative called Stantish. Have you come across that? Anybody? It was a kind of round table that the police would run and just invite commercial drivers to come and join them with a cup of tea at a round table and just chat. So whilst they were on their break, they would be invited to have those kind of informal conversations, just to chew the fat. There was no enforcement element to it. No, nobody was sort of required to come. It was only drivers who wanted to, but there was some. It came from Germany. It was and it was a sort of pan-European initiative that seemed to be quite successful. I don't know if it's still that sort of thing still happens.
I've never heard of that in my 30 years, and I'd be very surprised if it's happening, because the sad reality is, as with all public services, finances are squeezed, and resources are very scarce. And as an example, I was Warwickshire, and in the last 5 years, the number of traffic officers, so those that have had the training and got the skills, in Warwickshire alone, reduced by 30%. So you've got less experienced officers going out on the road, being able to, with the skills and knowledge, to go and speak to people. And bearing in mind that Warwickshire, we are one of the smallest forces in the country, we've got the biggest motorway network to cover, and that reduced by 30%, and that's being replicated across most forces now.
Now, I've got a few. I'm going to just pause you there, Sean. Nick Evans, you've got your hand up. Give us a quick comment or question, and then I'm going to go to Jonathan Daniels. So, Jonathan, if you wish to put your camera on, you're very welcome to. Nick first.
Yeah, Sean, can't agree with you, but as far as what you've just said, we are trying to get into schools. We've got 2 colleges just taking us on with our education piece, so on mobile device usage. So yes, there is a little bit of traction locally in schools. Hopefully we're going to grow that, and hopefully get into the mindsets of kids before they get out onto the road. So yes, we do need to educate more, and we are even getting invited to give courses to 12 and 13-year-olds. So hopefully we can change the mindset on the mobile device use. Like you say, let's have more education in the in that age group, especially, the 16 to 18-year-olds, while we can sort of ingrain something in their heads.
Yeah.
But like you've said, we have a total lack of traffic police out there. It's not like the 1980s. We don't see a traffic cop every 10 miles. And we need to resurrect that. It's not a good way of policing out there at the moment.
No, and I think there's several factors here. I mean, one of them is unless chief constables are made accountable for road safety, um, most of them won't change, because they'll be quite open and honest with you. You know, so I get measured on the number, for example, the number of knives I'll take off the road there, off the street. Sorry. So therefore, I'm going to put my resources into officers that will take knives off the street. At the moment, they're not being made accountable for casualty reduction. They'll have the targets, but they're not being made accountable. So that's that. The other side of it is a traffic officer is quite an expensive commodity. The vehicles they drive tend to be top end vehicles, so they're expensive in the first instance, and then there's all the training that goes into one. On average, just to get to an advanced level of driving, you're talking 5 weeks. So that's a lot of investment in time and money. Yet alone, if they then become VIP riders, motorcycle riders, and other bits and bobs. So it's an expensive commodity, and unless there's a change at the government level, I think that's going to be slow. The other side of it is again, I made a note of it, is obviously we talked about the drivers, the diet, the healthy nutrition, etc. What about the technology in our vehicles? We've got loads of technology in our vehicles that assists us in our driving, but it can be easily overridden or ignored. And one of them, for example, you'll get a warning that comes up on your vehicle. You know, you've been driving for 2 hours, take a break. But we can just ignore it, and then we just carry on. So what if we start making actually these systems, actually, you need to take a break. We're going to make you take a break, you know, because the most cars nowadays with the technology in there know exactly where you are on the road. They can say there's a service station coming up, you need to pull over, because otherwise I'm going to put your vehicle in limp mode or something similar. I mean, perhaps not as drastic as that, but technology's there, so why not use it? And let's get out there. I mean, you mentioned that you're in education in schools. Part of the team that I'm from, we're literally in schools from primary school all the way to the end. And I think that another area we can do, and I don't know whether other local authorities and road safety teams are doing it, but Mark and his team do a lot of work around obviously driving a better business and obviously raising awareness that way. What I do is I go in and support it at a local level. So I go into local businesses and organisations and actually talk to them about road safety. So I post them to the likes of the resources that are available for free. And when they realise there's information out there and resources out there, and when they've got a little bit of support for someone that can hold their hand and guide them through the process, you tend to get a little bit more engagement. As an example, I've been to one business, and I was tagged, for me, checking driving licenses must be one of the first things you should do, and especially if your drivers drive for work and represent you. There's one business, never done it. They had something like 250 drivers that worked for them, that drove for as part of their living with them, and they never checked drivers. And one of them, after the delivery that I made with them, they identified an individual that had no driving license but had been driving with them for 3 years. So it's a massive bit of risk that they weren't aware of going in. And yes, they know about the legislation and everything else, but they just didn't know who to turn to get that information. So what I do at a local level is I actually go in and support them in that way, and look at ways and look at the business and support them in like an individual bespoke basis.
Thank you very much, Sean. And Jonathan Daniel, you have a question. But I don't see.
Hi.
Hello there.
I think I've switched from camera on. I can see everyone else, but thanks. My name's Jonathan Daniel, Director at Fitback Physiotherapy. Fascinating conversation. Thank you, everyone, for your input. It's been really interesting to hear all your kind of input. So we're a physiotherapy, in essence, physiotherapy company. We've been working with many businesses with big driving fleets, if you like. And then over the years, our shift has really moved from just purely musculoskeletal to actually our role has become quite a bit of kind of life coaching in some ways. So often our physios will have extra qualifications in nutrition. So with the kind of slant on the nutrition side, it's great. We're in a really privileged position where we get time with drivers and can really sit down and talk to them about nutrition and what we're seeing. And interestingly, about the frustrations around service stations and fast foods, no one's really discussed packed lunches and actually, a cool box in the van or HGV, where a lot of our clients actually have canteens. So they're setting out from a depot. What we are starting to see now is that we're encouraging through our kind of recommendations is that the drivers are, leaving the depots with a cool box, which can be plugged into a cigarette lighter or in the back of the van. and they have access to good food. So they're stressed about trying to find healthy food. So you can pull into the service station or a lay-by, wherever they're on the kind of go, and actually eat a nutritional lunch and snacks and things. So we are seeing that this is one area where I think is a really increasing area. So yeah, I just wanted to kind of put that out there really. Certainly part of our Drive Well program, we're now encouraging with the nutrition aspect is really encouraging that. And personally, I can vouch for that because I used to eat, my mid-morning snack was just a piece of fruit, but I certainly get that sugar low and start getting a bit hangry around lunchtime. And now I've just started eating some almonds and walnuts, and my energy levels are completely changed. So actually passing on those kind of personal experiences, I can see all the nutritionists kind of smiling and agreeing and nodding with that. But it really has made a massive difference. So, the fuel that you put in is so vital and so important.
3 cheers for walnuts from my end, definitely. Walnuts are my go-to.
Absolutely.
Oh, Jonathan, thank you very much. I'm just going to move things along. Mark, let's just start talking a little bit in the time we've got left about mental health and what are some of the issues that you are aware of amongst the commercial driver world?
Yeah, that engagement on the mental health side goes back good few years now, and it was triggered back in my FTA days by hearing a guy I got to know pretty well actually over the years from the campaign against living miserably on the radio, talking about that horrible statistic, which I think we're all very much aware of now, that suicide is such a massive killer amongst men of a certain age demographic. And I'm just sitting in the car driving at the time, on my way to my next Cornish pasty and Mars bar, thinking, God, that must be covering most commercial vehicle and truck drivers. And it turns out, yes, it does cover most commercial vehicle and heavy and light commercial vehicle drivers. So we reached out to Calm, who were very supportive, and we created our Calm Driver campaign, which is still available up on us. But it's kind of interesting because you step back. I mean, the conversation we had with the guys at Calm early days really set the tone for this. They'd never really thought about the driver demographic at all. They did a load of work with organisations on site with posters and drop-in sessions and all the rest of it, and had completely forgotten about all these people who are out there, maybe walking out of their house with everything that's going on in there. Maybe they're having, their challenges with a relationship and all those kind of things which drag people down, getting into a van, going off and doing what they're doing, being, pressured, abused by other road users, everything else that goes with that kind of profession, and coming back to potentially an empty home, etc., etc. It's cool. And we thought, yeah, there's definitely something in this. And then we stumbled across a bit of data from the National Audit Office, which told us that commercial vehicle drivers had at least a 20% greater propensity for suicide than a parallel demographic who weren't commercial vehicle drivers. And we've been pushing that out now, along with many, many, many other people. And there's been a massive progress. I dropped something in the chat a little bit earlier, but there's massive progress. I mean, we've all heard the campaign, ask once, ask twice. Yeah, okay. No, are you sure? We've all seen that kind of stuff. Andy's men's club, all of that kind of stuff. Fantastic. You look back, even 10 years ago, wasn't there, was it? That infrastructure wasn't there. We used to fight shy of those conversations. So I think we've come an awfully long way. Of course, there's always more to do. But I'm also very conscious of the fact if we saw a similar kind of improvement in our ability to, and comfort in engaging around physical health issues as we have with mental health issues, that'd be good, wouldn't it? I mean, one of the phrases that we've been trying to socialise for a good while now is this phrase of driver roadworthiness. Lots and lots of businesses I deal with are brilliant at managing their vehicle roadworthiness. Their driver roadworthiness. And one of the ways I try and typify this when I get the chance to speak is you can imagine a fleet manager going up to one of their drivers and saying, James, would you mind going having a look at your vehicle again? It looks a little bit heavy when it came on the yard, or I'm not sure your lights are working, or whatever it is. And off they'll go and they'll do it. And if it's a yes, it's fine. And if it's a no, they know what to do about it. It's quite difficult to imagine that conversation being, James, you look absolutely tired out, mate. Have you had any sleep? What's going on? Or, James, your eyes look a bit if you have a good weekend, those kind of conversations don't happen. But that's where the risk is. So the mental health, I think, is important. Of course, it's important, but it also shows the way that we can improve the way we go about things, because we do that. You're carrying a bit of timber, mate. You think about it's not good for you. It's that kind of difficult conversation, but that's where the risk sits.
Well, let's just think then. Does anyone have any tips on how to have the confidence to deliver that kind of information? I mean, Anna, do you confront people and say you're carrying a bit of timber? Isn't it time you did something about it? Or are there other ways of being able to do that? Because it's obviously very personal, potentially offensive.
Yeah, it's a very sensitive area, isn't it? And I guess in a kind of male-dominated environment as well, even perhaps more so for people to be quite open and comfortable having those types of conversations. And that's a little bit of a generalization, but it is kind of quite a typical reaction, I think. There are some organizations that will have various different mental well-being, sleep, nutrition champions within the business sometimes that could maybe have some of those conversations slightly more informally. It may be that the line manager needs to step in, but it's all going to be down to the different relationships that the drivers will have with those individuals. They may feel very uncomfortable talking to them. But I think from the sort of protecting the organisation point of view, as well as the sort of care and responsibility to that individual, those difficult conversations do need to take place. So I'm sure that, again, maybe with some training, that can be handled more delicately, whether it is part of an appraisal type situation or whether the company establishes more informal interviews or meetings with the drivers, because it is such an isolating job and they are very much on their own. Whether that can be an opportunity for a kind of general chat where not just the issue of physical health is addressed, but other areas too. So I think it probably will come down to the personal skills that are needed to touch on that, but certainly shouldn't be shied away because of the delicate nature of it. It's very important to intervene, I think.
Thanks, Anna. Anita Humphrey, you've got your hand up. Would you like to reveal yourself and say what you'd like to say? You're very welcome. Hello, Anita. Oh, you're mute.
Good morning.
Hi.
I'm from VTech International Drug White. Mark knows me, and I know Sean knows me, and probably a few others might know me from way back. The reason why I put my hand up and why I'm in this morning is we are sponsoring a conference which is a crossover between the police and transport and logistics on the 27th of May 2026. And we are partnering with RHA and Drive for Health. And we are hoping to cover all of this in a conference. And we work with quite a few large organisations that supply food on the transport industry. Not that I'm going to name them at the moment, because we're working with them to hope that we can actually change perception of food within the drivers and make it cheaper for them, making a lot more healthier choices. But we're not actually just looking at the driver. We're going for the transport managers. We're going for the main company owners, because they're the ones that are going to send this message through to their drivers. If they're promoting a healthier lifestyle for their drivers, it will follow through. I may sound very passionate about this, but my husband is actually a lorry driver, so
No, that's
yes,
brilliant.
he is
Anita.
the way.
If details on would you like to put the link to the conference in the chat? And please stay in touch with us, and we'll push out some information on that. I'm just going to come to Kate. I know there's a few hands up and that kind of thing. Kate, just give us 60 seconds on peripheral neuropathy, please, because it's not just what goes into your mouth; it's kind of the ends of your toes and your feet. That just give us an understanding of it, a brief introduction.
No, great. And I think I was actually going to make a comment and say, I think we need to also make it safe in the workplace for people to come for, but also what are the driving what's the reason? Why should we change? we do know we should eat healthy, but what's our driving force to change? And anyone who's heard me talk often about peripheral neuropathy, I often go to the gentleman around erectile dysfunction. That seems to be a motivating factor. But your question was on feet specifically, and I think this is a really big thing we don't consider. 50% of people with diabetes have peripheral neuropathy, which is a swanky name to say lack of sensation in their feet. So we are seeing real big risks around pedal errors, pedal confusion, full on or full off. And this isn't something that has been looked at effectively, I don't think, and is a really large challenge when we look at those who are undiagnosed or not effectively managing their diabetes, which is when those complications and the nerve damage starts to happen. And as I say, so 50% of those with diabetes have it. So we've got about 2.5 million people in the UK who've got some form of this, which isn't being considered for commercial drivers. And as I said earlier, as sooner we can start to educate an awareness of why change, why do something? Well, actually, you can keep your job. Why are we doing this? Why would one less sugar or one less pasty? Mark, you shouldn't have mentioned it. Why should we have one thing change? Well, actually, these are the benefits why. And as a company, we want to protect and ensure we're doing that. We need that motivating factor towards, I think, as well. So, yeah, James, peripheral neuropathy is a massive area that we're working on and looking into with Manchester Met.
I didn't want that to go unnoticed and unmentioned. Look, we have a bit of signposting. Anna, Sean, Mark, Kate, you get in 30 seconds each to just do any signposting you wish or takeaway messages, starting with Anna.
Thank you. Yes, so I think on the back of what Kate has said, it's looking at small changes that educate. People have repeated in the chat as well about education. So I would love to spread the word as widely as possible about the education of nutrition science and how it can be so easy to make a few switches that can make such a huge difference. And I think waiting until you've had a health scare is such a shame for that to be your motivating factor. We can get in there so much earlier. And it doesn't have to mean that you lose the joy of food and eating. It's not having to suddenly become a purist at all, but it's understanding what different foods do physiologically within the body to help you drive safely and live and age well as well.
Thank you very much, Anna. Mark, would you like to just any resources, useful points of reference?
Couple of things I've dropped in the chat. First of all is the Driving for Better Business Driver Roadworthiness Guide, which is all free and available. The link's in there. We've got a lot more stuff working with partners, some of them on the call today, that we're going to be driving into that space. The other thing I'd like to kind of really just focus people's minds on, a lot of this, along with other risk topics within organisations, part of the solution is establishing that psychologically safe environment where people do feel able and comfortable in engaging. You mentioned the difficult question of, you look tired, you put a bit of timber on, whatever. I've dropped in the notes a link to a guy we've been doing a fair bit of work with, Tom Geraghty, and his organisation, who talks about a graduated level of assertiveness and uses the PACE acronym, PACE being probe, alert, challenge, emergency. So in a fatigue issue, are you feeling rested enough to do this journey? Probe, you got your hands, okay, I'm concerned. The alert, that you might be too tired. The challenge, this isn't safe, you should have a rest first, right the way through to stop. You ain't going, this is an emergency. So I know that's fatigue, but it can be easily adapted to other kind of things. And it's almost having that, if I can put it this way, that little script in your head before you engage with the conversation. So you know what you're trying to do rather than just letting that stream of consciousness out. But there's a load of resources out there from DFBB and other bodies. Use them.
Thank you very much. Sean, 20 seconds from you.
And my one takeaway from this would be if local authorities and road safety education teams can do this, have a specific individual that can go out to businesses. Like Mark says, there's a lot of information that's out there, but sometimes because there is so much information out there, businesses will struggle to find it. If they've got a single point of contact within their local authority they can turn to for help, advice, guidance, and actually train some people, go out there and deliver some training yourselves, that can start to make the difference because you're actually getting into those businesses and organisations.
Thank you very much, Sean. And 20 seconds to Kate.
Yeah, thank you all for a great discussion. For me, it's just, we've got a big report on diabetes, the type 2 diabetes impact on the industry on our website. And we're just about to launch diabetes and driving guidance for employees and employers. So if you want free resources, it's there. And we see that and the stuff we've talked about, we see that as a way in for physical health, because it's a known and foreseeable risk with diabetes. We can then engage with kind of other medical conditions or health conditions and the physical wellness almost through the lens that means it can be accepted and seen differently from a safety perspective as well.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, everybody. Next First Friday is on the 5th of December, and we'll be diving into the world of micro-mobility and the evolving regulatory landscape. But for today, that is everything from me, James, and the team. Thank you very much for attending.